So we are going to talk about the top 3 strategies for increasing your patient flow. Who doesn't want more patients? And we have Neil Zemba and Amber Nish with us tonight. And I'll actually hand this off to you, Amber, to kind of introduce our special guest and get rocking and rolling.
Let's go. All right, we're going to swap screen share and I will take it away. So excited. Y'all know I love a good marketing conversation. Anytime we talk about marketing, I just want to make sure we always remember what we're talking about. Let's make sure I'm sharing the right screen. We're all good. Yes?
Beautiful.
Great. Okay. We're always going to be talking about revenue, right? So this is again our profitability cycle. We're talking about revenue here, and within revenue, we're talking about how to increase patients, particularly new patient flow. We really want to make sure that you understand several things. So when you think about why am I in this call, what are we hoping to accomplish? We're going to talk about which marketing channels are most profitable for dentistry. When there, like everybody always asks me, what should we be doing? How do I know what we should be doing? Right. And so, as the former chief marketing officer, for those that I haven't had the chance to meet with, that's my background. I was a chief marketing officer for a location that grew from 8 to 75 locations, give or take, and had the opportunity to lead through patient acquisition efforts there. And so, get to talk about which one is the most profitable. We're going to talk about how to measure success in your marketing. So, how do I know what's working? That's always another big question people ask me about. And how do I think about what I should do first? If I know I need new patients, what's the order of operations? What's the first, second, and third? And there's no way that I can do anything like this without grabbing a marketing expert to come and chat it out with me. And so we have brought the one and only Neil Zemba, who is here from Rise DDS. Neil, we see a couple of points on your bio here. You got to talk us through how in the world you ended up from Silicon Valley to DSO owner to marketing agency owner. Give us some bio there, friend.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it, Amber, and just quick thanks to the DEO team for having me. Yeah, it's funny, like I think as we say, all of us that are non-clinicians that get into dentistry, I think, we find it in very random ways and then we fall in love and we never leave. And I don't think I'm any different. So yeah, I always kind of call myself a Silicon Valley tech nerd with a rural hillbilly twist. I'm from a very small town in Michigan. Spent the first 6 years of my career in Silicon Valley. I started a company called Serve Technology. I always say you've probably never heard of Serve, but you might have heard of some of the things that we developed. So we built a lot of marketing and attribution systems for the e-commerce space. This was in, 2000, from 2000, like late 2010 to 2015. So this was right when drop shipping was starting to become a thing. And so we built a lot of the analytics for companies like Shopify. Eventually, we kind of worked our way up and started working with Amazon. If you've ever gone on Amazon and you've bought a leaf blower, let's say, for example, and on the side, it's like, hey, do you want this book on gardening or something like that? And it follows you around forever. And there's a bunch of retargeting campaigns. Those are some of the technologies that we developed at Serve. We sold that company in 2015. I moved back to Michigan, where I was from. And I just had some partners that just kind of by happenstance had 2 dental practices and said, hey, do you want to come in as a partner on these practices? And I had 2 first thoughts. One, I'd love to. Second, that sounds illegal. How do I own dental practices, or how do I become a partner in that? And in Michigan, you're allowed to. And I really just fell in love with it. So I came on board as our chief operating officer, which when you have 2 locations means you're mopping the floors and answering phone calls. And so that's what I did for a long time. And we grew that from 2 to 5 locations. We eventually sold that group, started another one, grew that from 0 to 9 locations. And during that time, really focused a lot on operations, but I became obsessed with marketing because my front desk team, my non-clinical team, was constantly talking about the schedule. How do we fill the schedule up? And that's really when I started to look at marketing. And we had worked with a number of marketing companies at that point for years and years. And I always kind of joke, I say I've worked with every kind of persona of marketing: big companies, medium companies, guys that run Google ads out of their mom's basement, right? Every kind of thing that you can get in marketing. Noticed a lot of kind of common themes. And we started what at that time was called Project Rise DDS, where I just wanted to be able to understand and measure the names of all my patients that were coming in, because I knew that if I could at least get the names of the patients and understand where those patients came from, we could start to build out a tool to allow for better marketing attribution. And then several years later, we ended up building a tool that actually integrates into patient management systems. And that's kind of where we're at today.
I mean, how many of us are like, you know what, the thing we want to do next after we figure out this dental world is like, let's go build some marketing software and agency and all the things to solve the problems that we have? Probably none. We're grateful that Neil has the unique skill set and the unique capacity and is going to help kind of talk us through what did you learn? What have you built? What have you figured out? So one of the things that Neil and I talked about was like, all right, let's boil it down. Right? Marketing is big and everybody talks about, right? When we say the word marketing, always know, always associate, it has to be with patient acquisition, right? So when you think about patient acquisition strategies and increasing patient flow, we kind of identified there was these three buckets: current patients, new patient acquisition efforts, and then how do you measure and track it? So let's start first with like optimizing your current patients, Neil. I'm curious why you would even sort of prioritize that and how you'd go about that.
Yeah, so this is something, and just to back up to your point, I completely agree with marketing generating revenue. I think the like, you know, academically speaking, if you're not trying to actively generate revenue, I would consider that more branding or awareness, something like that. But then when you want to kind of kick it up a notch and start to bring in certain patients, specifically if I want to bring in more implant cases or Invisalign, or I'm trying to hit diamond, provider status with Invisalign, or, that kind of thing. If I want to fill my schedule in because I'm hiring a new associate, which is a situation that we work with a lot, I would consider that marketing, academically speaking. But you're exactly right. So it's kind of funny we kind of found this out. We have probably about 1,600 clients now that we work with across the country. And so we collect all this data, and we're seeing things that I just don't see other people kind of showcasing in the industry. And it's really interesting to kind of parse through and look at all this stuff. And one of the things that we found out, I actually can't believe it took us like years to find this, but like just basically realizing that a lot of practices, I personally like using kind of, that definition of marketing that Amber just shared. I personally don't think that practices are always ready for the kind of marketing or the level of marketing that they think that they are. I see that a lot. And what I mean by that is that, I'll have people, for example, come to us at Rise, and I'm like, look, I'd love to sell you something, but if you have, my definition is if you've got about 2,000 patients or more, I mean, really, it could be less than that are on a hygiene recall list, for example, that are not being called on. I always recommend that people start there. So I always say start with recall, start with recare before we even get into marketing, because you shouldn't. Otherwise, in my view, you're just spending money when you don't need to. I really firmly believe that the cheapest new patient that you can get is your existing patient in hygiene, and really also focusing on just case acceptance. What percentage of my outstanding, patients with outstanding treatment am I calling on? So before we even get into the marketing conversation, that's where I like to start.
Yeah, I love that. And anybody that's met with me is like, oh my gosh, you mean he's going to say the same thing she says to me, which is like, are you answering your phones? Do you have availability on your schedule? I love that you said scheduling processes are scalable. Like, do you even have room on your boards for new patients? Are you hygiene reappointing your existing patients? Are you converting your treatment right? Like, squeeze the juice out of your current patients. One of the things I love that you called out is this, like, get that revenue up, right? Like, how can we get in our practices, increase revenue so that, I love your mindset on this, Neil, so that you have the money to go invest in more patients. Like, you're going to come in and say, hey, let's make you more money. And then we'll just take some of that and we'll invest in marketing dollars. I love that mindset.
I look at it like a snowball, to your point. I mean, I say this, so our clients, and I'm the same way, I say this with all due respect, I'm exorbitantly cheap. I am very, very frugal. And I think in marketing, we have the tendency to get lost in shiny object syndrome. And I think also, like, we started Rise because to be honest, I was very jaded with marketing. I was pretty pissed. There were a lot of companies that I felt I'd spent a bunch of money with, and I didn't get anything. So, what we'll kind of get into today is there's a specific order of operations with all the data that we've looked at where we really, I feel very strongly about this, that, you start here and then you kind of continue to move to the next step as you collect money from the last step, so that you're not spreading yourself too thin, number one. But number two, so that you are measuring things in a sort of siloed way, which is, I just think is the appropriate way of doing it. So, step one to me is, before even getting into marketing, to Amber's point, make sure that we've got a great hygiene, recall program going on, make sure that my front desk or whoever I have doing it enjoys it. Frankly, that's another kind of thing. I mean, I see so many practices where the owner operator thinks one thing about hygiene recall, and then the person doing it really considers it busy work. Like, it is at the lowest, it's the lowest priority thing that they could possibly be doing. They hate it.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of sympathy for that, because so we pay our front desk probably, gosh, I would say probably 30, sometimes even more than that, 30% over market rate, but I ask a lot of them. And what we've toyed with over the last year or so is just getting a dedicated person for hygiene recare. And that has made a world of difference. And we found that typically with whatever I'm paying that person, we're typically seeing about a 10x to 15x month to month ROI with a dedicated person doing hygiene recall. And if I can train them even better, and we can help our clients do this, is also having that same person, they could potentially be the person that's reaching out for treatment recall as well. But basically the point is that now I'm looking at it, now I'm measuring it, and I'm measuring my monthly ROI. And, we'll get into the marketing piece, but in the marketing world, we're typically we see averages of between 5 to 7x month to month return on investment, like cash on cash return. I would consider that to be a phenomenal ROI from a marketing perspective. But with hygiene recall, it's 10 to 15x. So it's like, let's start, you're shooting fish in the barrel. I'm a country boy. That's, it's a country saying. That's what you're doing. It's your own patients. And then let's take that money and then kind of snowball from there.
Yeah, I love the call out that you made too, Neil, of prioritizing that front desk, that scheduling position. Most of the time in a practice, it's the lowest paid, most entry level, highest turnover position. And it's likely because we don't see and understand the value of keeping patients on the schedule. I'm like, that's dollars literally pouring out the back end. So if you prioritize elevating that position, putting some more responsibility on them, being clear about that, giving them training, but also paying them more and, doing what you need to do to retain them, the ROI of just protecting your own patient flow is going to be there in, droves, tenfold to some degree, and also allow you to have money for marketing, which again is, we know that's the sexy thing up front that everybody wants to talk about is, okay, I get it, Amber. I get it, Neil. Get my new patient and my existing patients, take care of them, do the treatment, do the things we talk about. Please tell me how to go get new patients when I'm ready. So you kind of educated me a little bit on this, which is fun, on this formula. So we all remember these days. Tell us about the formula.
Yeah, so it just made me think of this randomly. I was like, there's a specific order of operations, and I was like, you know what? It makes me think of PEMDAS in math class. And again, this goes back to, there's so many shiny objects in marketing. During COVID, I had probably a third of our clients call us at some point during COVID and go, man, there's this new TikTok thing and my kid's on it and people are dancing on it. Everybody's selling stuff by dancing on TikTok. Am I going to have to start dancing on TikTok to bring in patients? Everybody was asking this, and it was a legitimate question because TikTok was the new shiny object. It reminds me of stocks, right? It's like, how does the new shiny stock compared to a blue chip if I just put my money in Apple or Amazon or something like that? And so I think in marketing, you have the exact same idea, which is that there's always going to be a new, sexy, interesting, shiny object in marketing. And there's always going to be a marketing salesperson trying to sell you a new thing. So the question is, how does that stuff compare to my tried and true blue chip marketing stocks? Well, what is a blue chip, marketing stock? So that's where we kind of came up with this concept of PEMDAS, of it's a specific order of operations from all the data that we see.
All right. It's time to unveil. This is the moment. If you want it, grab a screenshot, right? This is the thing. This is the formula for marketing that, again, tried and true, your own practices, 1,600 practices, plus just tons of analyzing data out in the marketplace, because I know how you are and I know that's what you do. Talk us through kind of what you laid out is like, this is the formula, this is the order of operations.
Yeah, so from left to right too, you could also think about this as like kind of an increase of risk, but also an increase of time involvement, things
Mhm.
like that. Like how much of your time is it going to take? Also, uh, I would say like how custom is it? The more you go to the right, the more custom of a thing it is, the more, like Google Business Profile is like that's where your Google reviews are, right? Like you need a Google Business Profile even before this, again, is recall. But when we get into actual marketing world, I always say you got to start with Google.
Okay.
Google, from all the data that we see, outperforms everything else by about 4 to 1, including social media. So I know that's might ruffle some feathers in the industry. It's a little bit of a controversial statement to say, but we do everything now. Like as a company, I mean, we do social media marketing, we do all kinds of stuff. We do YouTube, we do, print. I mean, all these things work. It's just a question of, again, what do I do now? And then how do I make money from that thing right now to then continue to invest so that I can do all of the things. So the first thing that I say is to really, really make sure that your Google business profile is just completely on point. Another thing that we really have come to find in dentistry is that, especially for a GP office, like you really want to attract moms. I
Mhm.
have a saying that hell hath no fury like a suburban mother looking for a dental practice. It's true. They will look at all your reviews. They will go in, they are going to stalk the crap out of your profile, right? And it's not a bad thing. You just have to be where the moms are. You just have to
Mhm.
show the moms what the moms want to see, right? I'm obviously generalizing here, but if you can, it's like the mom standard. Um,
Mhm.
so the first thing is the Google Business Profile. This used to be called Google My Business or GMB. Now it's called Google Business Profile because Google likes to change the names of things every 5 seconds, but that's what it's called in 2025.
Mhm.
The first step is you want to own the profile. So if you don't know what I mean, you go to business.google.com and you literally want to make sure that your email is listed as the owner of the profile, not an agency, not something like that. I just think like it's like almost like as a marketing lawyer, so to speak, right? It's kind of like I would advise you to just own your profile.
Okay,
Um,
not Sarah, the front desk girl that set it up for you 3 years
correct.
ago, right? Like it needs to be practice, doctor, owner owned.
Yes, and if you're the kind of person like I do that gets a little bit stressed if you get a 1-star review, wait till front desk Sarah rage quits and then takes your profile with you. It's really, really bad. So
Mhm.
just make sure that you own your profile, um, and know how to access it and complete it. Again, you can go to business.google.com to do this. Just make sure your email is listed as the owner, and then everyone else can be listed as what's called the manager level. So you can toggle between levels. Google reviews are still extraordinarily important. I always say try to get at least 300 5-star Google reviews. I prefer doing it the old-fashioned way, having the front desk just ask for the review. I prefer to have them ask for the review when they're first coming in. So I have my front desk ask them to give us a review, just say, hey, we're doing a competition, we're having fun with this, we want to generate more reviews, whatever they want to say, and make sure that they identify that somebody's an existing patient. Again, I like to put a little bit more pressure than usual on my front desk. This is controversial, but all the data that we see suggests that the front desk person is just as statistically important as the dentist in a lot of cases because they're the first and last person that the or that the patient interacts with.
Mhm.
So 300 5-star reviews, that's going to do wonders for all of the other stuff on Google that we'll get into, including SEO and ranking and all that stuff is going to be heavily influenced by your profile. It's also used to create map ads and all this kind of stuff. So if you start running Google ads, but your profile is not kind of up to par, you're literally just kind of putting a magnifying glass on something that you don't necessarily want people to see. So that's why I like to start there.
One of the things I like to think about too, Neil, when we talk about Google Business Profile is that this is not a set it and forget it thing. So keep driving reviews, get in there and respond to the reviews. I'm a big fan of leave the negative reviews and engage with them. I do not like any filtering software people that say we'll only post the good ones and we'll pull out the bad ones. The people won't know. Like I've seen all that shadiness. I do not like it. But respond, engage. We can weed out crazy. Like we know when we see a bad 1-star review that Sarah quit and hates everybody and she leaves and asks, but then there's 27 other good ones right around it. Like people can weed through that. What they love is authenticity. I love keeping it active with new updated photos of the practice up, not stock photos, y'all. Don't be putting up a big stock photo of a veneer. but of patients that have been in your practice, of you, your team, what it looks like to be in your practice, the outside of your building, so they recognize where you are. Like, just really keep that updated, engaged, add a new couple of pictures every month, right? Just really staying active with it because Google likes it too, right? So your SEO actually improves when you play in their playground. They like to reward you for doing what they put out, but also it just shows a lot more engagement to a potential patient when you do that too. So I love when we think about that. And then I saw that you're like, oh, by the way, later down the road, we're going to talk about some social media stuff, some posting. Remember, anything you put there, throw on your Google business post, and we'll talk about that because it'll just copy in there and it just keeps it active and engaging. So once we have done that, right, we all know, you and I feel pretty strongly about this. Straight go to Google Ads. Got to go where the demand is living, right? Those are people that are asking, looking for a dentist. Be the best at capturing those folks.
100%. And I still say to this day, Google Ads is still the number one moneymaker by far. And a big reason for that, I get asked this a lot, especially compared to social media, right? And Facebook ads, which we'll get into, but I'll get a little jargony here for a second, but it's called what we call inbound advertising versus outbound advertising. And Google is still pretty much the only like major inbound advertising platform, meaning somebody has to take the first step first. If I'm going to Google Ads, I still have to type out best dentist near me first. The patient takes the first action, and then I can decide through the Google Ads platform to then show that person my ad. And I can also show them basically roughly how much I'm willing to spend on that ad. As opposed to social media, it functions very much like TV, radio, or a lot of more traditional media, which means that I have to basically create my ads first, then put them out in the market, pay for them to go out in the market before I actually get, actionable feedback. So basically, I can, on Google, I can pay after I know that there's high intent. On Facebook, I have to wait and I have to pay first before I even know that the demand is there. So that's kind of one way of thinking of it. I do agree that basically you should leverage an expert to run Google Ads for this reason, just because it's kind of a complicated software to use. It is true, but we'll show you today like some tricks for making sure that it's basically done correctly. And one of those things is to basically create ads. You want to make sure that you're creating ads, and really I'd say you create individual campaigns. So you create one campaign for each individual treatment that you offer. And that way, when we start to talk about marketing attribution later today, it's easier to attribute and track, okay, this, campaign made more money than this one, or this campaign made more money than this one. And this is something that, some folks don't like to hear, including myself, but, I might want to bring in a bunch of implant patients, but my implant campaigns might not be performing as well as my ortho campaigns, or as well as my emergency campaigns or something like that. Now, when that happens, you have two choices, basically. You have three choices. You can keep spending money on it and bringing in those patients, and then you have to really measure it appropriately to make sure that the juice is worth the squeeze, to make sure that, when you're, bullet point 2 here, when you're creating an individual campaign for each of your treatments, again, it makes it easier to measure it. And you can't manage what you can't measure, as they say. That's super true when it comes to Google Ads as well. You have to be able to measure it. So you can do that. And also, when you're measuring your Google Ads at the campaign level, you can switch them up, right? So let's say I launch our implant campaign, and it's not performing as well as I want. Let's say that I'm trying to bring in patients at, let's say, $600 per patient for my implant campaigns, but it's coming in at $1,500 a patient. Well, if it's isolated in that campaign, I can switch up my creative. I can move things around without messing with all my other campaigns to see if it's going to be effective or not. So that's kind of a high level strategy. Another thing is Google Ads, and this is just something that we've noticed over the years, like Google Ads, there's a lot of psychology involved with Google Ads. And again, it's because people are searching for things on the internet. So a lot of people get lost in, they hear kind of marketing agencies talking about geo-targeting and geofencing and, targeting, household income and things like that. That's really important. But I would argue that on Google Ads, it's probably more important to make sure that you're not using any keywords in the search terms itself, or the targeted search terms that are going to attract patients that you don't want. So for example, I don't like to have, so in Google Ads, you can have keywords and you can have negative keywords. So in the negative keyword list, you want to make sure you're putting terms like free, cheap, discount, things like that, because you got to think about it. People that are typing in free and discount, they're looking for a deal. They're looking, those are not typically the best kinds of patients we find. And in your keywords, you want to make sure you've got best, top rated, award winning, things like that. And then the maps piece will also take care of like a lot of the utilitarian stuff. Like, again, going back to the moms, a lot of times they're just going to want to know, do you have a lot of reviews, and where's your office, located relative to my house? Is it close? Exactly. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the high level.
So what's interesting about this, and I want to take a minute because this is where I think a lot of people could run into some questions. I know we talked about questions at the end, but Google Ads is where a lot of energy tends to get spent. I'd be curious if you want to throw in the chat, even like give me a thumbs up if you're spending Google Ads, you love your agency, and maybe even drop in there what your average spend per month is. And we can talk through some of that. And then also, is this kind of bringing to mind any questions for folks? It looks like I just want to make sure, Jordan, that we're capturing anybody throwing anything in the chat, or if you need to come off mute and you want to.
Naveen Quatra, you had a question. You had your hand raised, but I don't have any questions in the chat just yet. Naveen, do you still have a question, or did they answer that yet?
Mine was more with like I know Google before didn't have good like managed, other user controls. Like early on I had to give my password, but is it better now? Obviously, if you remember from a conference, I'm so bad. I do a lot on Facebook and nothing on Google, so I'm trying to up my game there. No more ice bucket challenge only videos. So if I do have like two people, I actually have an outsourced person now that's controlling content that easily can post there. I can create the manager user for them, and they can have access to just like posting content.
Yes, absolutely. So you can go to business.google.com, make yourself the owner, and it's literally called owner, in the drop down.
Yeah, I am the owner now. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and then you can exactly do just that. You can give them manager access. And it basically just means like they have almost the same privileges that you do. They just can't like run away with the profile essentially. And then to Amber's point about the social, I mean, the fact that you're already posting on social media, I think is fantastic. You just basically, there's a place on within Google, the Google business profile, where you can create a post, just like Meta, just like Instagram or Facebook. And so my recommendation is just whatever you post on your social media, just also post on your Google business profile, because it will show up. It actually makes the profile a bit longer, and it's more visual. And I just think it's a great addition to the profile. And it also improves your search algorithm. So it actually makes your profile show up more, because Google appreciates that you're basically posting to it and treating your Google business profile like a social profile. So you remember Google Plus, and Google wanted to compete with Facebook several years ago, and it shut down because nobody used it. They still brought a lot of Google Plus features into your Google business profile. And one of them is the ability to post content.
Well, and if you think about it too, like influencers on Instagram, the algorithm, if you are not posting and doing things, your stuff's going to get kicked to the back, and no one's going to see it. But if you are somebody who is consistently working that muscle, it recognizes that and is going to boost that. That's awesome. There's a couple other questions if we want to do that too.
The other part of that is, does Google, the business Google now, because we're going to start incorporating like YouTube Reels, since they're owned, does it connect, like Meta connects to all its owned entities? Does YouTube and Google connect since they're owned by the same?
So yes, it's a good question. Yes and no. You still have to manually post your videos in this case to your business profile. It should allow you to do that. I don't know offhand what the like video length limit is on Google Business Profile. I think they changed it recently, but you can run YouTube ads from Google Ads, so they're connected in that way. But you will, I believe, you still have to post like your YouTube Reels, and then you'd have to just take that same content and then post to your Google Business Profile. But you can definitely still do that.
So I see a couple of questions coming in the chat too. I think it's a good time to just take a second and like nail that down, especially because Johan, I think this is a great question. We're running AdWords and we are competing with some of the big dogs in metropolitan areas. I had somebody ask me today, they're just one practice. They've got Heartland down the street. They're pouring money in, right? So is it smart to try to even compete on Google AdWords in those high competitive, high demand areas like New York City?
Yes. So this is actually one of my favorite things about Google Ads. So this kind of reminds me of the book Freakonomics. If you've ever read that, it's a good book. So basically, there's three variables with Google Ads. There's what you're showing. There's the ad itself. There's what position it's in. So like, is it slot one? If you Google something, right, the first three slots usually are ads. But everybody forgets about the third variable, which is when the ad goes up. So time. So we work with some really large DSOs and they come to the meeting and they say, hey, we want to be number one for these terms at all times. And, our team goes back and they do some math and they go, great, that's going to be $500,000 a month. And they're like, what? And they're like, yeah, it's going to be $500,000 a month. And this will be in Kentucky, right? These are in the Midwest. So nobody, and it doesn't matter if it's Manhattan or Texas or LA or whatever, nobody really is doing that. And that's actually great. And it does allow for the little guys to come in and play in the market. And still with our DSO, we're the little guys too, right? I mean, we're not a huge group still to this day. So that's really why I love it. And there's so many little things, there's so many little tricks and things that you can do. One of them is that statistically speaking, now the second slot out of the three in the pack actually gets more clicks now, or just as many as the first slot does, and it's about half or 1/3 the cost. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I would try to focus as much budget as possible on your map ads anyways. Now, you can't just run map ads. Google doesn't let you you have to run some kind of search ads to have the privilege, according in Google's terms, to run map ads. But this is where you get into, this is why we put the Google business profile number one. If you have 600 5-star reviews and you're going up against big DSO, who, let's face it, is not going to be able to get a 4.9 with that many. They might get the volume, but typically they're really, really bad at monitoring those reviews. So typically the larger the practice, you actually have an advantage as a more of a boutique practice because you're actually taking the time to do this. So again, who is a patient going to go to? Even the DSO that's in slot one or slot two that has twice the reviews with a 4.9 as opposed to a 4.5 or whatever. So there's a lot of opportunities to just look better and you don't have to spend a ton of money. And even if you're in the third slot and you're spending, in some cases 1/8 the money, it's still phenomenally profitable. That's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is, if you've ever watched the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill, okay, it's a baseball movie. And the summary of that movie is that the baseball team was able to win games not by spending $20 million on the big hotshot players, but by spending a fraction of the money on the players that were really good at just running specific bases. So we actually call them in Google Ads our Moneyball keywords. And what I mean is longer keywords do better right now than shorter keywords. So I'll give you an example. Dental implants. Agency comes into a DSO and they say, we want more implant patients. And the agency goes, great, we're going to bid on the term implants. Well, that's a really, really, really expensive keyword because everybody is doing that. And again, going back to the psychology, how many people are actually typing in dental implants? It's way fewer than you'd think. And the psychology of why somebody would search implants, it's typically because they have a really expensive treatment plan in front of them. And they're like, this is $14,000. So they're typically price shopping. So instead of using a blue chip keyword, you can stack. Google allows you to have basically an unlimited number of keywords per campaign. So instead of having like 5 really expensive blue chip keywords, you literally want to have like 100 long form Moneyball keywords, which is my tooth fell out. How do I replace it? That might only get 5 searches a month, but again, you could stack it with 100 others. And I just paid, a fraction of a penny for my tooth fell out. How do I replace it? And I spent $60 on the term implant. So I'm getting a little jargony here, but there are a lot of concepts built into the structure of Google Ads that allows the little guy to not just play, but dunk on the big boys, which is unbelievable.
I love what you're saying too, Neil, because one of the things that people sometimes come to me, they're just like you were, pissed off at their agencies, right? Like if I polled everybody in this group, I would be lucky if 20% said, yeah, my agency's crushing it. I love it. We're doing a great job, right? Most of them, it's frustrating. It's hard. Things aren't working. And so they decide, I'm going to go send this kid on my team that I really like. They're doing a great job. I'm going to send them to learn Google Ads, and I'm going to send them to learn social media. They can post, they can boost things. We got this. And they go take a course and they go online with Google and they learn the things. And I'm like, y'all, you're asking for PhD level support to get this level of like bid on these and these small words and this and stack them. And you're sending somebody with a kindergarten education into an at bat that's just, unless this is your expertise, specialty, you're staying on top of every time Google changes something, every time they add a different word, every time a competitor comes in. It is an expertise to run Google Ads effectively. There are people who can do it technically without being as effective and understanding some of those concepts of how do you compete in a market like New York when you have to know not to put implants, not to mention you don't want to be paying for somebody who's trying to call a different level of implant doctor because they just typed implants and now you're like, we do not do breast implants. We can't help you, right? You needed to call somebody. Like that happens when you're not focused on full, right? Braces. Do you want knee braces, back braces, orthodontic braces, right? So I love the expertise that you're talking about. When we think about expertise, another one that came up real quick is, what do you think about the Google LSAs?
So that's a really good question.
And
Google
maybe
LSA,
define that for people who don't know what that means.
very good point. So it stands for local service ads. So they're the ads now that they don't show up for all of your terms, but I'll just say this too. So Google does have Google's tagline used to be "Do no evil," and then they changed it, and now I think they're doing a lot of evil. And one of the evil things that they're doing is they're basically moving towards making the whole front page of Google into ads, right? So let's just talk about that for a second. So not only that, but they're also making their ads look a lot sexier than the organic results. Now, we'll get into Google Organics and SEO in a second, but this is why I say this is one of those things, though, that is still very, very worth it.
This is one of those things that
The juice is worth the squeeze. It's worth doing Google Ads. LSA stands for local service ads. So they're ads that now they're at the very, very top. Whenever they are displayed, they're at the very, very top. LSAs right now, to me, are right on the fence of doing it or not. I think it depends on the market. So the pros with LSAs are that they're very, very visual and they're right at the top. So you skip go, you collect $200, you're right at the top of Google. The second thing is they're very visual, which is great. So you've actually got a picture of the doctor. There's its own little separate review system right up there. That's great. Now we'll get into cons. Number one, it's still very, very expensive for certain markets to the point where it's like prohibitively expensive. I, in general, don't think LSAs are worth doing yet. I think that's going to be more of a 2026 thing. The other thing that I don't like about LSAs right now, and I don't think that they're worth spending a ton of money on, is the original promise of LSAs was Google actually built in this whole system where you can basically call out, or you can contest a lead that doesn't end up becoming a patient in this case. So LSAs are also used for plumbers and lawyers and all kinds of things. And they just rolled it out for dentists about a year ago. So the problem is that in the dental world, the contesting system, which to me is really what made LSAs cool and interesting, doesn't work really well, if at all, yet. Again, it will at some point, but I think right now it's not quite worth doing, but it will be eventually.
Sorry, I was muted. That's awesome. There's so much that we can talk through and like just so many questions. We're gonna jump into a little bit of SEO because you mentioned, Neil, the idea of getting into like what Google's just prioritizing ads, it's pushing down organic. But for those who understand, and there's a whole world of people out there who do, who understand the way that Google plays, organic is still important. You've prioritized it sort of third on the list. A lot of people talk SEO. You hit on quickly because I want to make sure we get to the tracking side, but you hit on a couple things that I thought were really important, which is local keywords for each of the treatments you do and having those as separate pages on your website. So not one page that says, here's the Rolodex of all the things we do, but this is our implant page. This is our root canal, whatever your services that you're excited to offer, have a separate page for each of that on your website.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's two main takeaways here to me with SEO. The first one is having a completed Google business profile is going to boost your SEO automatically. Running Google ads gives you an algorithm boost as well. So just by doing those things, you're going to get really good rankings with SEO. And I say this too, because I don't want people to kind of fall into the trap of just paying a ton of money for just SEO. I think it's one of the things that, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm just saying I think it's typically the thing that gets way oversold. The company, hey, you're gonna rank within 2 months. That's really not true. It usually takes about 6 to 8 months to rank for certain keywords on Google. There's a lot of just kind of disingenuousness, I think, when it comes to SEO. So that's the first thing. If you can kind of think about it like personal hygiene. If you're taking care of yourself, you're going to be healthy, right? If you're taking care of your Google profile and you're running Google ads and you're checking the boxes that Google wants you to check, they will reward you by ranking your website higher. That's the first thing. The second thing is speaking to the content that's on the website. This is, if I can impart one thing on you today about website, it's your homepage really doesn't matter. It can be the sexiest homepage you've ever seen. You have to make each individual service page, all your treatments pages, just as sexy and interesting as your homepage. So the reason why is because if you're, again, let's say that I'm a patient, I'm looking for, an implant, implant doctor, or I'm looking for implants, and I click that ad, I don't want to then go to a homepage and then have to look around and find the implants page, or, I just want to click the ad and go directly to a beautiful, customized implants page that has no stock imagery on it. I hate stock imagery, especially with AI generation. Now you can get away with, I always say too, one of my hacks is just find a local film student or find a wedding photographer when it's out of season and just show them a great, amazing, sexy dental website and just say, do that, and give them $300 and they'll do it. So, but the big takeaway with the service pages is that you want to have content about the treatments, which is great, but that's where everybody stops. But you also want to add content about the doctor. If you're the doctor, you want to have your bio on the service page. I mean, you could really think about it as like one humongously long footer, where you've got the actual, content itself of the treatments. I would also add an FAQ about every individual treatment. And again, you're doing this on every single treatment page. And you might say that's a lot of content. It is a lot of content, and that's what Google likes. So you're really checking a lot of boxes when you do that. And then you want to have information about the providers.
Right.
Yeah, this is a good example.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, though, for the interest of time, because my favorite part about this is we're going to skip forward a couple of things. This is a great example of a website and all the things that you talked about. We'll make sure that you guys have access. There's so much that we can always talk about with marketing, Neil. Like we could go on and on, but the thing everybody gets the most anxious about is this right here. How in the world are you going to measure and tell us whether or not this is working? So talk us through how we're going to measure and track like all the Google ads, we kind of skipped forward on the social media and things like that, because really it's doable, but it's not as critical. But for this group tonight, I'm like, we got to show off why measuring is important and what we can do.
Sure. And I'll sum up social media in 10 seconds, which is to say, do some self-reflection. Ask yourself, do I have the personality and the time to put myself on camera? Or do I have a hygienist in the practice that is willing to go on camera and make content? If the answer is no and everybody's camera shy, don't even mess with it. It's okay. You can still make a ton of money on Google where no one has to see your face besides your beautiful photos, and you don't have to go on and make content. So that's social media.
So you don't have to dance if you don't want to, is what you're saying, Neil.
You do not.
You do not have to become a TikTok star. So yeah, when you think about, again, everybody knows, why are they frustrated with their agency? Why would I say 20% of them are happy, the rest of us aren't? It's because they have no idea what the agency is actually doing. They get spit a crap ton of reports, right? Everybody gets those like real pretty things from Google, the analytics, and they're like, look, all the marketing we've done. And you're like, I don't think we're seeing any new patients. Like, what is happening? Right. So how do you think about marketing and measuring? And I love this that you talked about. This is probably one of my favorite concepts is like, how do we think about the metrics with marketing?
Yeah, so I know Jake and Emmett taught me the DEO term KPI delusion, and there's
Uh-huh.
a slide that makes me think of that. And I was joking. I always used to call them BS or bullshit PIs, that they're not KPIs. So basically, uh, this is the marketing funnel to the right. And you've probably seen the marketing funnel without the green stuff before, but this is the actual marketing funnel, which is impressions, which is how many people saw your ads. And this could be digital or analog, by the way. Like if it's a mailer, how many people saw your mailer, right? That's an impression. So it's not, this is not just a digital funnel. It's kind of a universal funnel. Clicks is pretty digital. Obviously, that's how many people clicked your ad, but that could be basically, how many people kind of engaged with your mailer or something like that. And then is conversions. That's the magical BS term, conversions.
Uh-huh.
Is a call plus a form fill, or they might call them leads. So the academic term for a conversion is unqualified lead. And you might be going, gee, I wonder why nobody calls it an unqualified lead, because it sounds really bad, because it is kind of bad, right? So it's not bad, it's just in the middle of the funnel, but it's sold as being the bottom of the funnel where all the money and all the juice is. So the stuff in red is the definition of KPI delusion. You can rig those metrics. And I'm not saying like a lot of agencies, I'll actually, I think running an agency it's an incredibly hard business. I actually have a ton of empathy and sympathy for agency owners. It's a really freaking hard life. It's a hard business, but the problem is that they can't, and many times actually see what they're doing. They can't see where they're going. And this drove me crazy for years because I'm like, well, they're running Google and they're running Facebook, and Google and Meta are these big fancy $1 trillion companies. What do you mean they don't have the data? And the reason for that is that they don't have the dental data. They have generic data because Google and Meta have to be all things to all business types. They've got to do lawyers and book clubs and restaurants and whatever. They're never going to actually integrate with the PMS, and they're never going to give dental the time of day because it's too niche for Google. So the metrics that actually matter are after a lead basically books, but they've got to be qualified to book. They've got to be within the radius, and then they've got to have the right insurances, or basically, just to be blunt, they have to be able to afford their treatment. So that's a new patient booking. Now, what's the difference between the green and the red? The green cannot be rigged. Or if you do rig it, it's good for everybody, right? Like, okay, if I rig it, if I rig my marketing funnel to get me a lot of qualified patients that book, well, that's awesome. That's called good marketing.
Right. Hooray.
But if I rig a bunch of conversions like leads, that's where it's like, well, we got you, 10,000 calls this month. Didn't we do a great job? And I'm like, yeah, you got me 10,000 Medicaid calls. So you have a misalignment of success in the red. And in green, you have a unified alignment of success. And then once the patients book and then they show, that also cannot be rigged. I can't rig a qualified new patient that shows up to their appointment. Again, if they do that, I'm going to pay them a lot of money because I'm glad that they did that.
Right.
And
Please do. Thank you.
right, exactly. And then they get handed off to your case acceptance funnel. The triangle that's missing at the bottom is how many dollars they produced. So that's your true marketing funnel.
Yeah. What I love about this is there is a lot of software. And I think that that's a big call out, Neil, that like there is several software systems that live in between this. It is why it is hard for agencies to track it. Google doesn't make it easy. Then the phone system can only tell you whether the phone was picked up but not whether they booked an appointment. But the PMS only knows, right? So there is a lot of software, I think, that is part of the complexity. I love that you guys went in. So this is kind of an image of what a Rise DDS platform looks like. You went in and said, I have to solve the software problem. We've got to be able to see all the way through. So this is an example of your campaigns, right? And then this is bookings, meaning like you were just saying, not an impression, not a phone call, not a lead, but like this is an appointment in your practice management software, yeah?
Exactly.
Awesome. And then you guys have figured out how to extrapolate some out of the practice management software and say, oh, by the way, how much production? Did you have 12 implant cases? 12, right? I mean, I feel everybody's salivary glands just going because this is the dream, right? If everybody could have this level of data and go, Wait, you can tell me what ads you were running, how many appointments booked in my PMS, how much revenue. Oh my gosh, wait, over here, how much it cost us to run that campaign and get those 12. And you could even divide 12 into this and know how much each individual average appointment. Like, this is incredible.
Yeah, and to be fair too, like for education purposes, there are a couple other companies that are kind of in the space right now. So Line and Trackable are the two that I know that are kind of in
Uh-huh.
the space, which I think is a phenomenal thing for the industry, right? Like I always tell people, like, I built this for my own DSO. I didn't even build this to like start a company or something like that, but it's been such a need in the industry, not only with practices and DSOs, but agencies want this. They're not, and so the thing, like we're having a lot of conversations with agencies right now because they're to the public, they're like, we have all the answers, and they tend to oversell things. I don't think that's a controversial statement to say. Agencies
Yep.
are good at selling the marketing. They're not necessarily good at doing the marketing, right? And it's, to be fair, it's because they can't see the metrics that matter. They can only see the top of funnel stuff. So behind the scenes, I think it's a really nice relationship for us to be working and collaborating with agencies so that we can come to the practice together as a unified front. So again, we're not the only company that's doing this, but I think it's just it's a great thing for the industry to be able to show this. And obviously, if I'm a practice owner, like now I can, this is not designed to even get you to spend more money or even continue to spend the money that you are spending. A lot of our clients, for example, cut their budgets. I mean, I think a lot of people are overspending on marketing and not spending enough
Mhm.
on, again, maybe I have the wrong person in front desk, and they're not quite they're not quite, you know, where they need to be. And I think everybody, a lot of my friends that are owners get really hung up on like, well, I need to be spending this percentage of my money on marketing because I've been told to spend my 3% or 5% if you're going to get aggressive or whatever.
You're like, not if it's not working,
Exactly. And so then
right?
put it in buckets, and then it's like, but how, then they're like, well, my marketing doesn't work. What do I do? So
Yeah. So we're getting close to time, which it leaves everybody going, oh my gosh, but we need more, and we'll keep the conversations going. But just because you don't have that right doesn't make your agency not good at marketing. I want to be very clear about that. The agency can be great at marketing, just not have software. There are ways that you can hack the system a little bit and say, listen, at minimum, look at what you're spending with them divided by the number of new patients that are coming in your door and start tracking something. Next level is, okay, start tracking calls that are coming from ads. There is a button that they push that says calls, right? You can tag manager that and at least know we generated this many calls. And then ultimately, best ideal is like we work with an agency that has this software. But I want to kind of just call out that it can be done in multiple ways. I know that we're running at the end of time, so I want to be sensitive to that. Um, and just it looks like we've got a quick question. If the same patient makes multiple appointments, does this production number include all of the production from that one appointment? If so, what's the time frame for that metric? Look at that detail that somebody is ready and knows
right.
their ROI calculations. So Neil, what does that look like? The time frame on the production calculation? How long are you capturing that data for?
So that's a really good question. So in our system, it's the first 2 months. Sometimes the first 3 months. It actually, we can configure it based on what the client wants, essentially. But that's a really good question. So my opinion is that I like to do it the first 3 months because, again, if we're being asked by a client to bring in really, really high ticket cases, especially full arch or whatever, well, the first appointment's going to be their consult, and then they might do da 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 da. So I think a 3 month-ish window is fair to say this month you spent, this much money, and then over the next 3 months it generated this. What I don't think is fair is anything beyond that patient, like coming back in for hygiene and beyond that. So that 6 months and beyond, I think, is too much. So in our system, we call out like cash on cash, monthly cash on cash returns, which to me is it's the most important thing by far. And then we do look at lifetime, but lifetime to that point is usually oversold. Like it's a pet peeve of mine to say, well, the marketing broke even, but if the patients refer other patients, I'm like, no, I don't care about that. That's not like, of course my patients are going to refer other patients, let's raise the bar. So, but it's a really good question.
All right, y'all. At the end of the day, we're at time. I want to be sensitive to everybody's busy evening. So super appreciative of Neil. But here's what I'm also going to say. If you want help, Neil is not the guy we want to keep reaching out to because he's a CEO and he's got all the things, but he's got Alex. And I already heard rave reviews about Alex today. I don't know if Alex is on, but this is Alex's contact information. Reach out to him, reach out to us. We can help you guys get connected.